Welcome, everyone. Thanks for being here. This is, of course, the Entrepreneurship Speaker Series sponsored by Hillcrest Bank. I don't think I mentioned that on the first day, but Hillcrest Bank sponsors this speaker series, and we're grateful for them. We have a small number of people who will be joining us for lunch afterwards with Hayden, and that's thanks to Hillcrest Bank. So with that out of the way, I am very pleased to introduce our speaker today, who is Hayden Wadsworth. It is really fun to be able to introduce a speaker whose product is so well known, as HydroJug is. And it's not just known in our local community. This is a product that's known across the country, in part thanks to really positive national press coverage that includes Inc. magazine and Forbes and others, and a lot of in-state press as well. Hayden is no stranger to SUU. I don't know if have you been to this campus before?
It's my first time being here.
So he got an undergraduate degree in accounting from Weber State, and then did the MBA program here at SUU online, which is really cool. So please welcome for the first time to SUU, Hayden Wadsworth.
Okay, thanks, Tyler. First and foremost, I'm really excited to be here. It's always a really good opportunity for me to be able to share the story of HydroJug and hopefully help others in the process. Like Tyler said, I got my MBA here. I didn't come to my graduation, but I think we could probably count this. This might be a better ceremony than the graduation. We also have ties to SUU through Greg Powell. Ethan, Greg's son, is our product designer. So the HydroJug products that you guys see the most were actually designed by Greg's son. So really cool. I was super happy when Tyler reached out and we had a way to be able to participate and give back. My main objective today is to be able to provide value to you guys. I really want to talk about things that I wish I would have known as a college student that had aspirations of being an entrepreneur and owning my own business. Any time I get asked to tell the story of HydroJug, it's usually over lunch. And you're like, man, how do I fit an 8-year story with so many lessons, so many ups and downs, a lot of nuances into an hour? I try to think of the best way of doing that, and I want to break up what I talk about into 3 sections, where I talk about a little bit about my upbringing so you guys can get a little more familiar of who I am, what my principles and values are, and how those help me in my entrepreneurial journey. And then talk a little bit more about the business and HydroJug, and the principles of why we think HydroJug worked, what we think makes HydroJug a good business today, and hopefully the principles that you guys can take and apply in your goals. And then the last, just talking a little bit about how we hire at HydroJug and what we're looking for, and hopefully that helps all of you to think about how you should be thinking about things going out of college. And then have room for questions. And I'll actually take questions throughout just to hopefully get some participation early on. So after each section, we'll open it up for questions and we can talk. We can do clarifying questions. I can share more experiences, however you guys want to do that. So that the first part, just a little bit more about me and my upbringing. My mom, and I think this is kind of like where this story starts, is having really good parents that taught me and instilled in me principles that I didn't even know were really being built in to who I am today. My mom's family were first generation Italians, and they had a farm and a butcher shop, and it was always, work before play. That was the saying that my mom would always say to the kids, work before play, work before play. It was just like ingrained in me. And then my dad, he was a firefighter, and he had a landscaping business. And I remember in summertime, I think it started around 6th grade, a lot of my friends would be getting together to play like night games, and I would have to be going home and getting to bed early because I had to be up early the next day to go do landscaping. And I was like, man, this doesn't seem super fair. But my mom would always say, this is what it takes. This is like part of the family business. And that's really where I learned like hard work. Elon, one of the most, if not most famous entrepreneurs, he has a really simple math equation. If you think about the 40-hour work week, right? That's the typical work week. But then if you ask the question of a full-time job, you're like, well, in that 40-hour work week between coffee breaks and conversations with colleagues and whatever else we do while we're at the office, how many hours are truly productive and actually being worked, right? You know, probably 30. And then you ask yourself, well, if I figure out how to work 70 or 80 hours a week, how much further can I be ahead? How much more can I get done in a work week? And that has really impacted me. And I've had to apply that over and over and over again throughout my entrepreneurial journey of figuring out how to do more with less and always doubling down on hard work. If I'm willing to work 70 to 80 hours a week and my competition's working 30, I'm that much more ahead. In 2 years, I can get the experience of someone in over 5 years, right? So simple math, I can put in more time and get ahead through that. The next stage of my life, I bring that into sports, high school sports, and there's a specific memory that I have of we were doing sprints. And I remember I was always an X-Men, if people that are familiar with Pee Wee sports. So I was always bigger for my age, and I had to play on the line. And I really wanted to get off the line and be able to play like linebacker or running back, one of the fun positions that people see. So anyway, I'm an 8th grader, start maturing a little bit. I'm really excited for the upcoming season, and we're lined up doing sprints. And I remember just running my hardest. And I think there was like 3 or 4 of us in this sprinting group. And we get halfway through the sprint, and the guys around me just start passing me. And I remember getting through the finish line and looking over at the coach, and he just said, he's like, man, Wad, and that's what they called me, last name's Wadsworth, so he's like, man, Wad, you're just a bruiser, right? And that's the lesson there was, I am going to have to work for everything I want in life. Like I'm going to have to put in more effort. I'm going to have to figure out how to be more resourceful. I'm going to have to figure out how can I get better. And then I went on to high school sports, and I was able to get a speed training coach. I was able to put in more time into the weight room and have a coach there. I was able to do extra and problem solve and figure out, and I ended up being able to reach my goal of playing linebacker, of getting off the line. And that piece really inspired me of like, hey, you can figure a lot out on your own if you put your mind to it, if you ask the right questions, if you are able to put in the extra work, you can achieve what you want. Then I move into, after kind of that sports era, I move into an LDS mission, and I served in Mexico. And while I was in Mexico, it was just crazy culture shock. For those of you that have served missions, you'll understand that. And it's day in, day out, a lot of more hard work. And it seems like you're doing a lot for other people while you're on your mission. You're constantly thinking about how to help others and evaluating how can I get through to these people. And that really taught me customer centricity and figuring out how can you serve them better. Next kind of bucket of my upbringing is college, and I was just talking to Tyler about this. While I was going to college, I took like one semester where I was a full-time student. And then I immediately got a job at a place called Market Star. And I was doing full-time work and then full-time school. I was actually taking as many credits as I could because I wanted to finish as fast as I could. And then I was doing the summer school as well. And I had, in that time throughout, I was studying accounting. I got a job on base at Hill Air Force Base. And I had a 6-month gap between my undergraduate degree and then into my MBA. And that's when I started HydroJug. And I also had my first kid. And that's what I was telling Tyler is like, I had to learn how to be so productive. I couldn't have like 1 hour of wasted time because full-time work, it seemed like a full-time job with a newborn, and my spouse that was having her first child as well and supporting her, trying to stand a business up and going to school full-time. So it was a ton of work, but it really set the stage for me of like what it was going to take to be an entrepreneur. And this is another principle that I really like thinking about, and I use it today all the time, where you think about what is it that 90% of people are doing. If I want to be top 10%, right? If I want to be top 10% in the triathlon I'm training for, if I want to be top 10% in selling water bottles, if I want to be top 10% of entrepreneur, I have to do what the other 90% aren't willing to do, right? And that's difficult when you see most people, they get a full-time job and they're buying the new house and they're buying a new car and you're like, I have to do the opposite of those things. And in that time of my life, we'd bought a home that had a basement apartment in it, so we were keeping our expenses really low. No debt on cars. I was working through college, so no debt on college. And it really showed me, and it's like if based on what you want in life, you have to have a really good understanding of what the sacrifices need to be, and you make those, and you can start to see the things that you're trying to achieve come to fruition. So that's kind of the college era, and then this is kind of where it brings me to HydroJug and the HydroJug principles, and the story of HydroJug and how we started it. I guess this is the first point where I want to ask if there are any questions, anything you'd like me to elaborate on, any of the principles I kind of discussed in that first section. Yeah, go ahead.
What would you say when you were just starting? Who were your biggest competitors, and what were the 10% doing that the 90% weren't doing?
Yeah. Yeah, so he asked me what were your
biggest competitors when you were starting, and what was the 10% doing that the 90% weren't doing, based off of your experience?
Yeah. So who were my competitors, and then what was kind of everybody doing that, and what did we do that the others weren't willing to do? It's a great question. So that does kind of segue into the next portion of what I wanted to talk about. But just to get straight to your question, what we did is, first of all, if you think about our first product was the half-gallon jug, right? It was plastic, and it had like a blender bottle, like flip top on it. Really simple product, right? Nobody was doing it though. Like everybody was just using old milk jug that they would fill up and take to the gym. So there was already a use case, like people were using it. And mine and Jake's question, Jake is my younger brother who I co-founded the business with. We were like, why is nobody doing this? Like, why don't we take like that milk jug, put on nice features, make it a quality product, and then brand it and create a cool experience around it and sell it? That was the question. And that's what we did, that 90% of brands like Yeti, Blender Bottle, Contigo, which I would say like kind of the ones in the blender bottle space were like Contigo, who else? does those. There's not a ton of the shaker bottle ones, but those were probably our direct competitors, and they weren't willing to do this half-gallon jug. And we asked the question, which it wasn't apparent then because I had zero experience in entrepreneurship. I had zero experience in product development, in marketing. I was an accountant, right? Like, I knew how to do the books. But so we were like, why hasn't the company done this? But if you think about it, the product is horrible to build a business model around because it's really big. So if you're bringing it in from China, you can only fit so many into a container, not a lot, right? So your shipping costs, your import costs are pretty high. You can't sell the product for a high dollar amount. It's plastic, right? And we were the first ones in the space, so we kind of named the price. We didn't really know where to price it. But $20, not great for an e-commerce model. If any of you guys are familiar with like performance marketing, you want a pretty high average order value so you have enough money to go and acquire customers and then hopefully make money across the lifetime of that customer. So bad there. Horrible to store, right? Like it was just a terrible product. So I'm actually shocked that I'm hearing that it worked. But yeah, so that's what they weren't willing to do. They weren't willing to take the risk. It wasn't an attractive business model for them. They were killing it in shaker bottles. Why would we go do this? And then I feel like the big thing that really set us apart, and it still does to this day, is in e-commerce, there's this model of like, the easiest way for me to summarize it is if you guys know the streetwear brand Supreme, right? Like very limited type product, hyped up and drop like centric. Nobody was doing that in the drinkware space. Not Blender Ball, not Yeti. I mean, Yeti still has black lids for the most part, pretty boring, like pretty slow to iterate type company. But we took what we saw, what was going on in these cool streetwear brands of like a lot of colors, exclusive drops, and we brought that into the drinkware space. That really kind of separated us. And that was kind of the start of HydroJug. So then you start having the problems that I discussed, right? Like low average order value, right? That's a problem. Low repeat purchase rate, like how many water bottles, water jugs can you fit in your cupboard? Shipping, like, so you started seeing all these problems and you start asking yourself, okay, how do we fix these? And there's a saying that I really like, and it's you guys may have heard it. It's good times create weak people. Weak people create bad times create strong people create good times, and it's just this cycle. And it's the same thing in business. You see it in business, and that's, I think, humility is a superpower in business, because if you think about like these businesses and the cycles they go in, right? Like you'll see it a lot of times when businesses raise money. There'll be this really good brand and it's cool and it's well managed, but then it'll get acquired and you're like, Supreme's a great example, right? Great brand, gets acquired by VF Corp, disappears. Like, what happened? And a lot of times, I think it has a lot to do with that humility piece. Like you raise so much money or you have so much success, you stop asking questions and you stop wondering like, how do we get better, right? And typically it's bad times that push you into that state of mind. But if you can keep that state of mind, you're going to stay ahead and stay on top of it. But you have to really stay humble in order to do it. But back to HydroJug, we started asking those questions, and we ended up coming out like a lot of customers were asking us, are they insulated? Are they insulated? We'd go to trade shows and people would come up, are they insulated? And I'd say, yeah, and I'm going to be a billionaire because I created the first vacuum-sealed plastic water bottle, right? But we ended up coming out with these neoprene sleeves, which was a really cool part of the business because it insulated the product. It was $20, pretty affordable, great add-on, great upsell. And then we put prints onto the neoprene sleeve. So you think about what's trending in clothing, you think about what seasonality there is, what time of year it is, and And we put these prints onto the sleeves, and then we started sending them out to influencers. We partnered with influencers. We did limited collections. And the sleeves became a really good add-on item. So our AOV went from $20 to $40. And then our repeat customer rate went from almost 0 to like 30%, right? Because we have a reoccurring piece of the business. And the reason I talk about those two things is because it's really important. Like, if you're going to start a business, whether it's a product or a service, whether it's one of those two things, that is like the beating heart of your business. If you don't have a product or service that's valuable or differentiated or unique, it doesn't matter what your culture is. It doesn't matter who's on your board. It doesn't matter what what softwares you use, because it won't work. Like that, your product has to be the beating heart, product or service, of why you're doing the business. And it has to be differentiated, and it has to be valuable. So if we skip ahead, we've been doing this for 8 years now. And we kind of evolved over time from this plastic jug and neoprene sleeve into stainless steel insulated drinkware. We were a very niche fitness brand. I mean, you think about like a half-gallon jug, to now we look at ourselves, what Yeti is to like the outdoorsman, HydroJug is to like an active lifestyle, right? Like that's really what we're trying to build, is drinkware for an active lifestyle. Very similar concepts and principles that we applied to this model of, we see Stanley, right, selling a ton of bottles, and we kind of watched how they were doing it. They took a lot of inspiration from what we were doing, as far as like applying like really cool colors, partnering with influencers, and doing the social media things that we were doing at HydroJug. And we just look at the product and you ask yourself, how can I make this better? How can I make it more valuable, right? So that's the product, and we always start there. And a big piece of it was obviously that when it's tipped over, it doesn't spill. Like, that was a huge pain point for people that were using Stanleys. And then you ask yourself, well, how can we make it a little more unique? Like, and I never imagined like myself being like a water bottle nerd and being super passionate about like water bottles. But on most flip-up straw water bottles, they were all rectangles, right? I don't know if you guys have noticed that. That is kind of like a weird thing to know. But we're like, why are these flip-up straws rectangles, right? And this is where I work with Ethan Powell a lot, where I'm like, hey, Eth, we want our straw to be circular like a straw. And I'm like, make it look beautiful, right? Make it look really high quality. So Ethan will go and make the straw look seamless, because it has to go into like kind of a square base, and then you have the circular portion of it. And then the top of it, we use Triton, which is like, it's probably like the most, it's a really pretty plastic, but it's also really high performing. And then on the straw, we use Triton, and then on the bottom, we threw a rubber base on it, right? So like, Stanley really wasn't doing any of those things. So you have a product that is creating value for the consumer. And we also priced it $5 less, which is important. Like, you think about some of the best businesses in the world, if you can beat your competition on functionality, aesthetics, like how pretty is the product, and colors, stuff like that. Distribution, like how easy is it to access your product, and price, you're really going to do well if you can do all those things. Like, you think about Costco, right? They do all those things. Great business. Apple does a lot of those things. Nike does a lot of those things. So once you can get your product or service and differentiate it and create value for your consumer, you move into what I think is the brand and marketing piece. Like, how do we let people know? How do we make sure people know about our product and understand how it's better or valuable? And to me, it's really interesting. I'm very involved, and I'm really passionate about the product piece of the business and the marketing and brand piece of the business. That's kind of where I naturally gravitated to. I don't do hardly any of the accounting or numbers, but I know my way around, so my undergrad was helpful. And I work on some of the legal stuff too, but mostly product and marketing. So I always was wondering, like, you ask people, what's a brand, right? Like, what is brand? And people will have different answers, but it's really difficult for people to answer that question. They'll be like, it's a community, or it's a slogan that people can get behind, or it's a feeling that a company gives you, and you feel like you're part of it, right? And there are all these vague answers. So I've spent a lot of time thinking, like, what is brand? Because you can really spend a lot of money on brand, and it's difficult to get like a definitive ROI on brand, which the ROI piece is super important to me because, as you know, we're always trying to do as much as we can with as little as we can. But how I define brand is the brand is the consumer's interaction with the business at every consumer touch point. So what is the experience with your top funnel advertising? What does that content look like? What does that messaging look like? What is the experience once they land on your website? What's the experience when they check out? How well do you communicate the shipping? How well do you communicate the USP, unique selling propositions? How fast do you ship the product? What's your warranty like? What's your customer service policies? Once they get the product, what's the tension that it takes to open the flip straw? How do we define quality in that, right? All of those things are brand, right? And you don't need to hire a expensive branding agency to come in and tell you how to do that, right? Like, we're all consumers. We know what quality is. We know what quality should be. We know how companies should perform and what those standards and what our expectations are. So we try to do a really good job of those things and build processes and people so we can deliver that experience, right? Like, when you set the traveler down on like a granite surface, right? It's not going to clink. It's not going to be like, to me, when I hear a bottle without a rubber base set down on like a granite countertop, it's like scratching on a chalkboard to me. It's just like the worst thing ever. So, but that to me speaks experience. That speaks quality. So that's kind of the after product, that's the next thing you need to solve for is the brand. Like, what is the brand? How do we communicate it at every consumer touch point? The next is marketing. And this is another area that you can really spend a ton of money. And there can be a lot of smoke and mirrors behind these marketing agencies that are telling you you're getting X ROI and it's not really there. And again, like that, you can just spend all the money in the world in that area, but if you don't have a good product, it won't work. As soon as you do have a good product, you'll all of a sudden see your ROAS shoot through the roof. You'll all of a sudden see all your marketing metrics shoot through the roof because it's a good product, right? Tyler was asking me some of the biggest milestones for me, and he mentioned the Inc. I think we were 33rd fastest growing company on the Inc. 5000, and then mentioned in Forbes, which those are really cool, but one of the biggest or coolest things is when you see Kylie Jenner using your product, right? Like, you're just like, whoa, that's crazy. We didn't pay her. It's probably $1 million for her to post it, but she just posted it for free because it's a good product, right? Like, she gets it, it's quality, she uses it, the content aligns with who she thinks she is. So in the marketing piece, you're really looking for ways to leverage what you call network economies. For those of you that it's kind of a foreign term, network economies are like somebody's social following is a network economy. A business's customer base is a network economy. The people that watch Fox 13 are a network economy. And what you're trying to solve for is like, how do I leverage these network economies affordably? And that's called earned marketing. And the more earned marketing you can do, the better. And that's what we did early days, right? Like, so we started HydroJug in 2017. Like, everybody on Instagram wanted to be a fitness influencer. So if we reached out to them and we're like, hey, we got these products, this mint one actually sells out every time we release it, we want to send one to you, or we want to give you a discount code, they're all in and they're going to post it like crazy, right? Tons of earned marketing. And that's really how we were able to get it off the ground, but we still focus on that today. We're asking ourselves, how do we get Kylie Jenner to post this? How do we get Baze, who does a great job at influencer marketing and has all these influencers on retainers? They're paying out hundreds of thousands of dollars a month in retainers to these influencers. But if we say, hey, we have a great Christmas gift for all of your influencers, we're going to laser engrave Baze on these products and send them to you guys, and then they send them to their influencers that we're paying. We're getting all that media that we didn't pay for. So that's the brand and marketing piece. And then the next piece is, and I should say like sales and marketing, because obviously like you're trying to build out as many, what the term today is like an omni-channel approach, right? Like you want to make sure that you have a really good retail presence, you have a really good D2C, whether that's Shopify or BigCommerce presence, and then you want to have a really good marketplaces, so that's like Target, Walmart, Amazon, business. So obviously you need really good distribution networks to be able to plug your products into. And then the last one is infrastructure, and that's like your finance, that's your systems, that's supply chain, all of those types of operational roles. And you're asking yourself, here's the objectives that we have inside of product, sales and marketing, and brand. What support do we need? What reporting do we need to be able to support those functions and make sure we do those really well? And that's really the framework of how we operate HydroJug, and how we ensure we stay on top of like iterating on product and making sure that we're always adding value in what the next product is. I see a lot of Awalas out there for some hints on what we're working on next. Yeah, I know that's like a lot to throw on everybody at once, but that's kind of been the 8 years of what we've been building and how we're running and managing the business. What time does this end?
12:20.
Okay. I think we can open it up for questions. I'm happy to like drill down on any of those specific points. Talk about any like random questions outside of those points too. Just whatever I can do to add value to you guys.
So you're big on talking about ROI.
Mm-hmm.
How much capital did you put into the business, and how long was it before you started seeing return on that?
Yeah, excellent question. So we started the business with $13,000. It was really just like everything I had saved up, and then it was the money that my brother had saved up for an engagement ring. We went to America First, and I was like getting ready to like transfer the money, and a branch manager came out and he's like, "Now, are you sure you know what you're doing?" I'm like, "I don't, because I've never done this before." But yeah, 13,000, and then as far as the ROI piece, like how long did it take before we got that money back?
Well, how long until you started getting a profit, like after the expenditures of whatever capital you put in? And did you also do any like funding outside?
We never raised any money. We've gotten really very little debt. All of our debt's been like SBA loans, very like conservative type stuff. I will say though, the first 4 years of HydroJug, I worked a full-time job and did HydroJug. Like we did not pay ourselves or take a salary from the business for the first 5 years, because even when I went full-time, I wasn't drawing a full salary. Like you have to be so careful about the strain that you put on the business. You never want to be a liability to it, especially in those early days. Like you want all of that money going back into product and back into marketing. So we didn't get any money out of the business probably till year 6. As far as like distributions or salaries go, and we're still very careful about that and try to be like on the conservative side. Like it's crazy because I remember the first the first year we did $1 million, I was just like, man, like this is going to be great, right? But it really takes a lot of time and investment to get to the point where you can start taking money, especially if you're growing, because all your money is going back. If I sell one bottle, if I'm growing 5x, I have to sell for every bottle I sell, I have to buy 5 more, right? Where's that money coming from? If it can't come from the bottom line, I have to go get debt or raise money. So.
So those first 6 years you were still having like another job. How much time were you spending towards the company because you had to do other stuff as well?
Yeah, and this was strategic. My job at Hill Air Force Base, I would work my 8 hours there. I could get in as early as like 5 a.m. And it wasn't ever stressful. Like I never had to stay late or like work after hours. So I could get to the office by like 3:30, and then I would work until 8:30. And then you start talking about like weekends, right? So I could get pretty close to full-time work on it, especially with the weekends. Like you can work, as long as you want. So, yeah.
Do you have any mentors along the way? And then, like how did you tackle any obstacles when you faced them? Something like that.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I for sure had mentors along the way. The one thing, I should have started my whole spill with this, is like there's not one way to do business. There's so many different ways that work. And we're in a world where there's so much information and people are just talking at us from like every different angle is what it feels like. And a lot of people speak in a manner where it's like, this is fact, this is true, right? And it's true for them and it worked for them in their way. And so I just say that for the mentor piece, because I did have a lot of mentors, but what worked for them didn't always necessarily work for me. So, but there's also pieces that did. So you kind of have to approach mentorship with like, what was their experience? How is this similar to my experience? What pieces can I take? What pieces won't work? Because it doesn't mean everything they say is going to work for me in my scenario. What was the second piece of the question? Did you have a second?
Like, have you ever had any obstacles in your business?
Yeah.
And, like if you fail one strategy, how do you handle that?
Yeah, so we had a period of time so COVID 2021 was like our biggest year ever. And then like most e-commerce, iOS 14.5 came out where Apple basically cut Meta off from their data sharing to be able to have really good customer data, and ad efficiency just like plummeted. So there was a lot of things that happened at once going into 22 and 2023, and it was a really hard time. I think our sales declined like 50%. And like I mentioned, we had SBA loans, all personal guaranteed, right? And it was like 18 months of like, we were losing, I would say, anywhere from $100,000 to $200,000 a month. And we were trying everything. Like we were trying softwares, we were trying consultants, we were thinking of new strategies. What influencers can we work with? And it was like day after day, no results. So that's kind of where I'm talking about like the principles I learned as like growing up, right? That helped me, that I didn't know were going to help me, but when I got in those times of like a lot of adversity, it pays off when you've gone through that before, right? Like you know how to double down on your principles, continue to operate the same way you would in success. Work really hard, be humble, ask for a lot of people's opinions, try to find be resourceful, try to find different solutions to problems. But that's how I'd answer that question.
I noticed how you said that HydroJug started out as being, like its target market was people living an active lifestyle, but it's not that anymore. It's definitely,
Yeah.
I feel like it's transitioned into the everyman archetype. I mean, you see people left and right using HydroJugs, like myself included. So
Yeah.
how would you say that you have been able to maintain your brand image and still that ideal target persona while applying to anybody that wants your product?
It's a great question. I kind of frame that like Nike, right? Like Nike really targets like athletes, right? And I wear Nike, but I'm not an athlete. I aspire to be one. I like to close my eyes and think that I can be one, right? And I think that's kind of what you want your brand to be. You want it to be aspirational, right? It doesn't mean that they have to be there in that moment, but it should be something that inspires people, right? Like, and it doesn't have to be active. It could be health. Like, hey, I care about being healthy. So like HydroJug inspires for that and makes me want to aspire to be that. It makes it easy to drink more water in a day, right? So I think you can build your brand like that. Yeah.
Do you guys offshore your manufacturing, and how are you guys preparing? If so, how are you guys preparing for possible tariffs and what's happening?
Yeah. You sound like an investment banker. Yeah, it's a very difficult question to answer, and the way that everyone is answering it right now is like wait and see, because it's super expensive. We manufacture in China. There's really like 4 factories that every water bottle in the United States comes from, and they're all pretty close together. And but yeah, it's super expensive to have to try to move that footprint to Thailand. And then you ask your question, how effective would that be anyway if there were tariffs? We've been through a Trump presidency before and Trump tariffs before, and it was manageable. So right now we're pretty optimistic about what's going to happen.
What was the deciding factor that made you choose from like taking your idea from just an idea to actually like put it into action and get a loan and all of that?
Yeah, so I drove around like I said, I was always thinking about ideas with my brother, the guys I worked with at Hill Air Force Base, and I had the idea, and then I drove around in my Honda Civic with a half-gallon jug and a blender bottle in the back seat for like 4 weeks, right? And I'd have to hear it like rattling around, and like one day, because I didn't know where to start, right? Like, where do you go to like manufacture a product? I didn't know, but I was like, one day I was just like so sick of it. I was like, okay, like today's the day that I do it. So like I drove to like a 3D printing place and I was like, dude, I want a prototype. I want to mix these 2 products. What do I do? And then they said, you need an industrial designer. You're going to need tooling. And they kind of gave me steps and just went. So I think it's like, you just got to do it. Nike.
Where do you see your business success level in 5 years? What is your future plan for your business?
Really difficult to say. For me, business has really evolved. Like in the beginning, I think it starts out a lot about money, like having to do with money. And then it starts to become about like brand or other things. And success kind of evolves over time. And I don't think money's a big enough motivating factor to be an entrepreneur. It's like your New Year's resolutions when you're like, man, like I want to lose weight. It's almost not a good enough like motivator. You got to have something that's bigger than that and means something more than that. And really like water bottles, like at the end of the day, like how great are water bottles? I love them. But like at the end of the day, like I want that to be an expression of who I am. Like what are my core values and like what am I trying to build and who am I trying to build it with? And it becomes about like my journey as an entrepreneur and a person and how I'm learning and growing and what I'm experiencing. And to kind of bring that all back, I would love to experience an IPO, right? Like I want to build this into a company that could be public one day.
Not to go back towards the beginning, but when you have your first child, you're just starting the company, you're still going to school. What was your routine kind of like to be able to keep that family time, school time, everything separate, but also continue to do that?
Yeah, this is actually something that I'm pretty passionate about. Like there's a bunch of like phrases thrown around like work-life balance, right? And a lot of times we like to frame it in the micro. And I think it's impossible. You can never be balanced in the micro. But if you look at it in the macro, which I hope that makes sense to everybody, like day to day, I'm never going to be balanced ever. But if I look at my life and the span and like what I can do over a lifetime, I'm going to be able to be pretty balanced. And I didn't have the luxury of really like naming my routine. It was like if I wanted to exercise, I knew I had to be up at 4, right? And then like weekends, I just knew I was Saturdays like were exam days. Like I was going to be taking exams like almost all Saturday. And then at night I could work on the business Saturday night. So like if you think like I was telling Tyler, I was like, right now I have the luxury of, me and my wife, we watch a Netflix show before we go to bed, and it still bugs me because I'm like, I could be doing something with this hour, right? But yeah, so I was really kind of forced into my routine, but whatever time you can squeeze out, you just have to be very productive and efficient.
Got time for one more question.
What's the process like for designing a product into like getting it a manufacturer? What was the process of finding a reliable manufacturer?
Yeah, and there's a lot of ways to do this. Like the ways that companies like we do it now, like Yeti does it, it's expensive. Like you're going to have a lot of designers, you're going to have tech packs, you're going to have 3D renders and models, and that's the expensive route. But it doesn't have to be like that. Like you can get somebody now that's outsourced, their product designer in the Philippines, and they're really skilled and talented at it. But the first step would be getting a designer, whether that's like an industrial designer or like for soft goods, a clothing designer. So there's specific designers, usually hard goods is an industrial designer, and you want someone that's kind of familiar with the space. And then you're going to want some sort of like tech pack, which is like a bill of materials, and it's going to call out all the specific features of the product. And then I just found, if you go on Alibaba, you find a drinkware manufacturer, and they have like a feature where you can send out the RFQ, which is request for quotes, and it'll send it out to 500 suppliers. And then you usually get on like WeChat or something, and you can do like factory tours, you can get samples. But yeah, I would definitely meet with someone that's like imported stuff, because you're going to talk about like what kind of terms do you want to get, and who's going to be your customs broker to bring in the product. But that's like high level, like what the process is of coming up with like getting a product designed and getting it to a stage where you can send it to a supplier to build it. Yeah. Okay, thanks everybody.